Hello kiddos! Today is March 22nd, the anniversary of the dreaded day, the My Chemical Romance breakup. So I thought it would be fun and a good old time to get together, gather around the campfire, and take some time to remember the My Chemical Romance history. Pay a little respect, if you will. A couple of things to note. I'm not going to be talking super extensively about 9/11 or Gerard getting sober. While they're super big, super important pieces of the My Chemical Romance history, I think a lot of us know a lot about it already, and if you don't know a lot about it, there's a lot of resources out there for you, and I can always make a video later if it's requested, but for today, we're just gonna gloss right over it. Okay, getting right on it. Starting in 2001, a look at what everyone's kind of doing. You have Gerard, who has his art degree and he's working for Cartoon Network in New York. You have Mikey, who's working at Barnes & Noble and going to school. Ray graduated from college with a film degree, is playing drums for Dead Go West. Frank is playing for Pensy Prep and has nothing to do with the other people. So what kind of happened to form the band is Gerard witnessed the 9/11 attacks on his way to work, and it jump-started this real crisis. He kind of went, I'm not contributing anything here. I'm not doing anything. What's the point? So what happened as a result is that he started writing lyrics. Skylines and Turnstiles came to be in October of 2001. He looked at what he had made and he went, I have to make this real. So he called up his friend Ray and said, help me do the thing. And Ray did. Ray came over and decided to call up his friend Matt, who he had been in a band with previously. So they start out as a three-piece band. You have Gerard singing and playing rhythm guitar, you have Ray on lead guitar, and you have Matt on drums. But in the end, the way it came out is that Gerard just was not good enough to play guitar and sing at the same time. Frankly, he probably wasn't going to be able to just play guitar, let alone do both. So when they came to the conclusion that this wasn't going to work, they needed to back up their rhythm section elsewhere. So what they did is they brought in Mikey to play bass. In December of 2001, Mikey joins. Mikey picks up bass in pretty much a week. He had a little bit of history with bass, he had kind of dabbled with it, but nothing extensive. He hadn't played for anyone before. So they really worked together to make that work. Eventually, after Mikey had joined the band, they still didn't have a name. So Mikey brought to the table a band name, My Chemical Romance, which he had gotten from a novel called Ecstasy, The Tales of Chemical Romance, which he had just kind of been flipping through at the Barnes & Noble. Coming into 2002, they start having demos made, they start performing, they start doing things live, they start getting their name out there because they have one now. So they get signed to Eyeball Records. Who else is signed to Eyeball Records? Pensy Prep. Pensy Prep is Frank's band. Label mates. As label mates, Pensy Prep and My Chemical Romance really start to do stuff together. They share a practice space. They give each other feedback. They go to each other's shows. Pensy Prep listens to the My Chemical Romance demos on the way to their shows to get pumped up. It's a really good dynamic of building each other up and becoming friends. But it didn't take long before Pensy Prep broke up. So what did Frank do? He turned to his friends for a home, for a place to be included, and naturally, they wanted Frank to join right in. So they start recording their debut album, I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love, which Frank is only on 4 tracks of. He comes into the studio and they have a demo for Early Sunsets put together and they play it for him. And what he does is he takes it, he listens to it, he takes a napkin, he takes a Sharpie, he goes to his van and he sits there and he writes his part. And he comes back and records it. That's how you have the album version of Early Sunsets over Monroeville. The real disappointing thing, through all this excitement, through all of this ecstasy of their band being real and the album that they put together being real, Gerard's going through all of this tooth pain, which is a huge distraction from the whole process, but in the end they do get through it. So their album drops in July of 2002. They're doing really well. They're getting a lot of attention, they're touring, they're playing local shows, they're just doing everything that they can to get their name out there. Frank and Mikey drop out of school to be on the road. So, taking this energy of touring and getting their name out there, they go into 2003 doing the exact same thing. They tour the country, and they finally get to leave the country and go to the UK with The Used. Going to the UK was a super surreal experience because they get there and they have people that have made homemade My Chemical Romance merch, and they get to realize that their content is traveling the ocean, even though they had never been there before, but people were still hearing it. Going into their next record, they signed to Reprise Records, a part of the Warner Music Group. And they start thinking about what they want to do next. And what's next is 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Trying to not drop the energy levels, they stay touring, they keep getting their name out there while writing their album. But while they're writing their album, they get invited into a professional grade studio. They're dealing with professional equipment. They're dealing with money. They're dealing with a producer. They have resources that they never had to them before. So they have to make this album bigger and better. While they're on Warped Tour, Three Cheers does get dropped. Over and over, left and right, they're getting calls about how well the album's doing, about how it's getting requested on radio stations, about how it's selling off the shelves, and they just can't believe the success they're facing. After the album drops, after they finish their Warped Tour, they decide to go overseas to Japan, which is where Gerard meets rock bottom. During this tour, they make two huge decisions for the group. Gerard gets sober, and they kick Matt out of the band. The whole situation with Matt is very ominous. There's not a whole lot of information out there, so what I do have, I have kind of from possibly unreliable sources, but it all seems to kind of line up with what I do know. So we're gonna roll with it. If I'm wrong, please let me know. I think the reason there's not a lot of information on it is that A, the guys don't really like breakups. They don't like to distance themselves from people they either once or do call friends. They don't like to have to make tough decisions a lot of the time, so they don't talk about it. At the same time, during this era, there wasn't really a lot of documentation happening on them. So, you know, it's not like when Bob left and alternative press is like, oh my God, what are we doing? It's just a lineup change to a little band that some people sometimes care about. The way it worked out is that the whole thing really ended up being a Matt versus Ray debacle. To be a drummer, you have to have a good sense of rhythm. Matt did not. When he was in the studio, like most drummers do, he had to play with a click track. If you don't know what a click track is, it's a rhythmic click to keep you on time that does not fluctuate so that your drums essentially will not fluctuate. If Matt did not have the click track, Matt could not keep time. And Matt refused to play with the click track live, so therefore the drums were out of time. The whole backbone to a piece was fluctuating and not sturdy. And Ray, as a musician that takes a lot of pride in what he does, insisted that he play with the click track, and Matt had too much pride to do so, so they were just butting heads over the issue constantly. And it did not help that Matt was instigating fights with pretty much everyone in his band all of the time. So the end result was Matt or Ray, and you have Matt, who's not contributing anything and is causing problems, and you have Ray, who just wants things to be good and is an amazing guitar player. So there was an obvious choice. After they return from Japan, Gerard gets sober, Matt's kicked out of the band, Bob replaces Matt. The first time we see Bob as a piece of the band is during the I'm Not Okay music video, which he learned the drumline for in a weekend. The single dropped, Bob was in the band, Gerard was sober. Now that they were facing real success, they had to start pushing the envelope. Or at least they thought they did. They started playing with dancers on stage, they started wearing costumes, and they started adding real theatrics to the entire production. They do this for the rest of 2005 and into 2006 until they're ready to start writing a new album. So naturally, the guys have this brilliant idea to write their album in the Paramore. Now, if you don't know what the Paramore is, it's this haunted mansion in LA where The Scream was filmed and Halloween was filmed. Like, why did they do that? It's just so over the top and unnecessary, but at the same time, they had the opportunity to be able to write whenever they wanted and live amongst each other and really give themselves to this album. But also, you could have just gone to a studio. But it's good. I know that Gerard has talked about what a dark time that was and what a dark time writing the album is, because he really just put his all into it. He wrote notes about death and destruction and just darkness and put them all over his room and surrounded himself with it and just really let the album and the concept envelop his mind. But this thing that he did put his mind to and they all put all of their energy into did eventually become The Black Parade. And The Black Parade, it's an influential album, even today. I think that's just what it takes sometimes, to really give your work everything that you've got until you have nothing left so that it can go on to live without you. Anyways, they take the album live and it continues to be just as over the top as before. They perform with actors, pyrotechnics, skits, bits, the whole 9 yards. So what they do is they go into their world tour in 2007 and they're on the road for 15 months. 2007 is not just a year for touring, but it's also a year for marriages. Frank and Jamia got married right before they left for tour. It felt a little bit like, hey, so I'm gonna be gone for like 15 months, so if we're gonna like do this thing, we should probably do it now. Mikey and Alicia got married, which took Mikey out of the tour for a little while, where he left to go do the husband thing, to go start his life, to really spend time on his honeymoon, and relax. Meanwhile, Gerard and Lindsay just got married on tour. So just like everyone gets married this year, everyone leaves the tour this year for some reason. Mikey leaves to go do his honeymoon, Frank leaves because a family member is ill, and Bob leaves because he's ill. All the time. Just like his bandmates before him, Ray and Krista get married once Ray returns home. So here's the thing. Gerard plans things. Gerard plans things thoroughly. He hadn't planned anything really past the Black Parade. So I think when their break started, not having intent of what to do next made it really hard to come back. There just wasn't really an expectation for a future from MCR on a lot of fronts. But finally, they get together to write again when they're asked to contribute to the Watchmen movies. So they write and record and release Desolation Row by early February 2009. With this experience, they remember how much fun playing together is. So they start promoting the band again by releasing Vengaza. And naturally, I think it's important to note that Bandit is born May 27th, 2009. Afterwards, on July 31st, 2009, they play their first show in over a year. And all of this, between Desolation Row, Vengaza, and their first show, Back Together Again, they're really just revving the engine to get started all over. They go into the studio with the intent of making new material, and that new material that they talk about is what we come to know as conventional weapons. Gerard talks about it a lot with the press, about how it's a really angry record, about how it's a new record, they're reinventing themselves, they're back to being just a rock band, and how this new record has made everything else that they've ever done irrelevant, and how that's what making new content is all about, making it more important than your old content. And then they scrap the album. 2010 creeps up on them, and Bob leaves the band. Even on this, I don't have a whole lot of information on it, and no one really does. People talked about it, people knew it happened, alternative press releases material saying, Bob is leaving the band! But no one knows why. We do know, however, that the My Chemical Romance guys that do remain expect us to go on supporting and loving Bob. In August, Cherry and Lily are born, and directly after Na 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 drops. And it's entirely new. I don't know how many of you were around for when that happened, but it was bright, and it was colorful, and it was exciting, and it was completely different. Even the sound was entirely new. And I remember the build-up for the album. They had this television broadcast on their website where everything was coded. Everything supposedly meant something. And I remember me and a bunch of my friends and people on the internet sitting over this broadcast for like hours, trying just to figure it out. And of course, no one did. And the videos started dropping one by one, and they were all so different and so new, and it was this big concept and story that was just enticing. So many people were so angry at the change, and a lot of people left kind of the fan base. But at the same time, the era is such a huge piece of the history and is so important and is so iconic. During all this, Michael Petticone replaces Bob as a touring member of the band and is just about immediately removed as he is caught red-handed stealing from the band. That of which they talk about plenty. After this, it seems like all they do is tour until they go back underground again. Until they perform on Yo Gabba Gabba. An iconic moment, because every snowflake's different, just like you. 2012 hits and things start to really slow down. They disclose that they're building a studio, James Dewees joins the band, and there's all of this buzz about MCR5. Gerard sitting in the big chair looking like a pixie saying, MCR5! Just kidding. Miles, of course, is born in 2012 as well. And finally, in September, they announce that new music will be being released, and this is what we come to know as Conventional Weapons, which is released 2 songs at a time, once a month. Ray's son is born in December of 2012, and I cannot, for the life of me, find this kid's name, let alone his birthday. He's a mystery, an enigma, if you will. But we respect Ray's boundaries! And just like that, the last single for Conventional Weapons is released in February of 2013. And 45 days later, we get a single paragraph note on the website, and it's over. The band has broken up. While everyone does post their own little tidbits on their own social media, on their own websites, whatever it may be, the note itself is still hauntingly impersonal, and it's all we have. In 2014, May Death Never Stop You is released, which is followed by MCRX in 2016, both of which cause their own booming MCR reunion rumors. Past My Chemical Romance, they've all done their own things. Gerard has the Killjoy series, Doom Patrol. He's working on an Umbrella Academy series with Netflix. And he also has his own solo work. One album released and another one in the working. Mikey worked with and could potentially be working with Electric Century in the future. Ray released Remember the Laughter, which had its own theatrics that we can see elements of in the My Chemical Romance music as well. And of course, you have Frank's solo work, which is coming out constantly, and he's touring with constantly, so he's really the most active of the bunch. I think in the end, it's really important to look past the ending, what could have been, and what feels so lost. Their memory goes on every day. I know when you go to Warped Tour and you look across the field, you see people wearing My Chemical Romance merchandise. Of all the people that we could have chosen to support, we chose them. As a nod to individuals across the venue to say, I know your pain, I know what you're going through, I know what you're feeling, and I feel it too. MCR affected so many people in so many amazing ways. They made so many of us believe in art, made us feel like we have a home, we have a place to belong, and people who understand us. They gave us friends and family, and they certainly gave us hope in our everyday dark spaces and even in our brightest moments. And with that, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and hit that little bell icon below because I do hope to have new material up on the channel for you. All kinds of fresh emo content in 2018 because it's not stale at all. Perfect. And after this, after they bring men. No. My body should creak. Boom! There it is. Okay.